we're here.
Hey everybody, welcome so much to Gen Con. This is Shoot Your One Shot, exploring the versatility of TTRPGs. And welcome to my channel. I'm Jess. You might see me down in the chat as Angry Nerd Girl. And these are the Threeflings. We play every Friday night at 8 p.m. We're also playing tonight at 8 p.m. because it's Friday. So let's meet our panelists, and I'll stop being random. Oh, please, Nightbot just reminded us, turn in your tickets if you haven't done that. Thanks. So let's start with Gwen. Tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Gwen DB all over the internet, and I'm an illustrator and a cast member on Threeflings, so I am very well versed in playing and occasionally running, though not for Threeflings, one-shots. Otherwise, I'm usually an illustrator by trade, so that's going to be my angle of attack here.
Jess Pack, the Jess who isn't me. Who are you and what do you do?
I'm Jess Pack. I am a writer, editor, an all-around goofball. So I have written 3 one-shots, and yeah, I don't
played millions more.
I was gonna say, you want to talk about the fact that one of yours is in the Uncaged Anthology?
Oh yeah, my first ever module is in the first volume of the Uncaged Anthology, and it was my first time writing anything for D&D, and I decided that I wanted to write a tier 4 module. That's my first module.
As you do.
Because I don't do things by half measure.
And Ink, who are you? What do you do?
Hi, my name is Ink. You can find me on Twitter at TheseDeadPens, where I like to meme but also talk about things that I'm involved in. I tend to illustrate, but I also sometimes edit and lay out. My most recent projects have been the Threeflings livecast. I did the recent Wisdom Under Fire charity anthology, where I did illustrations for that. And I also recently did the Studio Ghibli anthology, which got released. It should be coming out either this week or by the end of August. And I think it's called Dreaming Skies, so you guys will see that around. I will try to figure out what the official name of it is and throw it in chat for you guys.
Awesome. So for those of you who don't know, we all play on a show called Threeflings, which is every one-shot in the Uncaged Anthology combined as one campaign. So because of that, and because one-shots sometimes get a little bit of flack in the TTRPG space, people don't always know what to do with them. We wanted to run a panel to talk to y'all about one-shots and answer questions that you have.
Additional background information. If you don't know what Uncaged is, it's a collection of feminist retellings of classic monsters in the D&D universe, and it is all one-shots, every single one of them. There's 92 of them, so we have read and played through just so many one-shots, you guys.
Yeah, I will drop a link. I should have put that as a bot. But yeah, I can do that. While I ask everybody else to describe your favorite one-shot badly in a sentence to get us warmed up.
I'm nominating Jess Pack to go first because she made the mistake of saying offline before we got started that she had a really good one.
Yeah, well, I have 2. So I have one that's Threeflings related, and then I also have one that's related to the Uncaged Anthology and my module specifically. So my favorite Threeflings one-shot is 3 local tieflings, Spidey, Bitey, and Righty, make a complete and total asses of themselves at a festival. Also manage to save children against all odds using only half a brain cell between them.
There are so many. You know how little that narrows it down?
Hey, describe your favorite one-shot badly in a sentence.
Oh god. I'm just like, which one do I want to go? Because Jess just covered like half of the ones that we've played so far. Oh no, there are things in the basement. Also, using the bathroom is a great excuse to get away from a small child.
That's good life advice, too.
It is.
I will branch out for mine instead of doing a Threeflings one-shot, because how could I pick a favorite child? I will do a home game. This was a one-shot that my DM incorporated into the middle of a campaign. So to explain this one badly, it is, hey, remember that boat you got from that necromancer? Turns out it's full of undead. Roll initiative.
I love that.
It's a very good one-shot.
Oh, no.
And I will say one that is in Uncaged, but the Threeflings haven't played yet. And that is basically mermaids by way of Pokemon and a trip to the opera.
All right. I'm confused and excited for this episode.
So I'm going to ask the three of you, what's it like playing in a campaign entirely composed of one-shots? And how's it different than a regular campaign?
Ooh.
Oh.
I feel like the most immediately noticeable difference is that like the through line in terms of plot is non-existent / what you make of it. So it very much becomes like your players kind of fall into a story by accident, just by virtue of doing so many adventures together, which is interesting, and definitely different from a lot of classic adventure paths where like they have a very concrete, here's your goal, go and do it, you save the world, good job, kind of setup. So I like it.
I just realized this panel's gonna be like 30 minutes of the four of us just like sitting here being like, you gonna talk? I'm gonna talk. Are you gonna talk? Because I don't want to talk.
You're lucky your DM is here, so Ink, talk.
Don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact.
It's definitely an interesting situation because, like Gwen said, there is no like central motivating thing to kind of road you to one specific location or goal all the damn time. But it also is really good because you can like not be fully present like for 1 week and then come back, and it's not like, well, now the world is ending. I don't know why. Here's 5 things that I now own. Why? No one knows. And it's very easy for us, especially because we are on a weekly schedule, that if one of us can't be there, we can always swap out like guest friends that we have, and it's not ever like you have to worry about coming back and trying to relearn everything that went down.
Related, that makes the Threeflings show very accessible to dive into, even though there's already 30 episodes, because there's no lore to keep track of. So
most lore you're gonna get is about each individual person.
It's just gonna be like weird in-jokes that probably don't make sense to the regular viewers anyway.
And then you just hear like Jess's cat in the background, and then we're like, okay, there's more lore.
Yep.
So Pac, what about for you? How's it different from a regular campaign, and would you recommend it?
I would definitely recommend it. I really enjoy doing one-shots as a campaign, mainly because like a lot of times, like in a normal like 1 to 20 campaign, you spend a lot of time like just goofing off in random towns. I'm not saying that like we don't also goof off, because we definitely do, but I think the like how brief a one shot is, you can kind of cut all that stuff out, and if you still want to collaborate on like certain things that happened in between one shots, you have the flexibility to do that. So like with me being out recently, like we could just write it off as like, oh, like Euphoria was off doing like this one thing, and she'll be back eventually. So I really enjoy the flexibility of being able to sort of like do that stuff, like collaborate outside of table time. Yeah. Like when you sit down and game every week. I think that's a really nice option to have.
And building off of that, I think that it is something I would strongly recommend to anyone who wants a regular game night with friends, but who just doesn't have like the scheduling willpower to get it done. Like I am in a Curse of Strahd game that has taken 3 years, and we are still not done because we can play about once every 4 months. And it's always different people every single time. So we've got about 11 PCs, and then whoever's in the game is just the 5 who can manage to show up during that game. So that one, for example, would benefit greatly from being a campaign full of one-shots, because then it can just be like whoever's there. And there's definitely a time and place for that sort of thing in a group of working adults who are still friends and would still like to get together and play some games.
Yeah, and I would add from a DM or GM perspective, it is a little bit, so it's kind of funny stringing together a campaign from one-shots. On one hand, it's easier in a lot of ways because there's less prep, because, you know, you have the one-shot there, it's written for you. The
pre-campaign prep is a lot longer, particularly if you're doing, 92 of them, because the leveling might be a little wonky. I would suggest getting one-shots together where your players will have regular level progression. Uncaged doesn't really have that. There's way more tier 1 than anything else. So these poor lovely people have been stuck in level 4 for about 800 years.
We've been level 4 for 3 months.
But so getting a sense of level progression, and also check your locations. It seems kind of silly, but if they're in the desert one day and then in a snowy mountain the next, even just having some sort of through line to connect how they got there would be nice. Like put something in a forest in the way so that you can break up the areas would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask, we kind of covered this a little bit, but what's everybody's favorite thing about one-shots? Gwen, you kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, I really like the versatility that they give you, both in terms of, in terms of like subject matter and in terms of style of adventure. I greatly enjoy that the Threeflings, for example, can bounce around one week where there's a missing persons quest, and then the next week there's like a murder mystery we have to solve, and just like tonally they can be very different. So you're not committing to 3 years of Ravenloft and trying to find one goddamn vampire.
He's everywhere.
Everywhere.
He is the land.
But it's really good to just keep things interesting and keep things moving and give you that flexibility of the people who are playing today want to do a dungeon crawl, so I can grab a dungeon crawl one shot, and the people who are playing today just want to spend 2 hours talking to this tavern owner, so I can get a one shot that's, gonna encourage them to do that. And I greatly enjoy that because of all the things that I said before.
What about you, Pac?
Gwen kind of stole mine, but
I have another one.
No, it's fine. I like the fact that with a one-shot, it's a really great opportunity, and I'm probably going to talk about this later. It's a really great opportunity to take a topic that you're really passionate about and do a deep dive on it, or seeing how people approach certain complex issues within the span of a one-shot. So that's something that I find really neat and interesting, and it's basically you'll never run out of material that way.
Yeah, it's a lot of good things that come out of doing one-shots. For example, I used to, when I ran a game club at my old high school, I did one-shots for kids that didn't know if they wanted to get into this, hardcore, and be in a campaign. And for kids who already knew that they wanted to, this goes for anyone. You can use one-shots to play characters that you've never really played before. So if you are someone who is typically really reliant on magic, you can try playing a fighter for one of your games, or do something that is completely weird and out of your wheelhouse, play something that doesn't make sense. And it can be a really good way to just figure out how you want to play as a person and how you want to interact with other people at the table in a way that is both in character and out of character, without worrying that you're going to be in a long-form story and then be switching character decisions right in the middle of it, which can make it difficult for both you, your GM, and your party to understand your goals and your kind of whole deal as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just confusing.
I think to kind of to group together all of these things, it sounds like the main appeal of one shots for us is just that you have so much versatility without a ton of commitment. As a DM, as a writer, as a player, as an artist, you can do a little bit of something you're excited about and then leave that going, that was great, I had a great time, as opposed to committing to a full adventure path of something that you think might be interesting, but you get most of the way through and you're just like, I can't believe I'm playing a ranger for levels 1 through 17. What have I done?
Listen, I have commitment issues. Don't call me out like this.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really like about them, is that they're not, you can use them as a way to introduce a new character. You can also use them as a way to see if somebody likes a system. Mm-hmm. If there's a new game that somebody wants to try out. I love when games have a one shot included in them, just so that you can see like, hey, this is how this runs, and see if your table likes it. And if that one shot includes a way to make it into a campaign, even better. So if you liked it, then it can just keep going.
And I think the Uncaged Anthology one-shots are pretty good about that, because they do generally end with advice for like, if you wanted to continue this, here's how you would. At least in terms of broad narrative strokes. Like, you know, maybe the person you rescued from this thing has like an artifact that they need you to deliver to a different town, and then suddenly you've got like a broader adventure hook that's going. Or the naked bloodman that you fought in an episode that was very traumatizing for all of us. Turned out he wasn't the only one doing that. Now you have to go stop a whole bunch of them.
I'm really glad I wasn't here for that.
Gwen, you touched on a little bit about being an artist for and with one shots. Can you tell me a little bit about like how art plays into one shot creation?
So I really enjoy doing art for smaller projects, because I think, kind of to the point that Jesspac said, where like you can just pick something that you like and then really like go hard on it, and it can be like a weird small niche thing. The art can be like that too. So you get a chance to do something that's different and maybe harder to do, or maybe more experimental, but you don't have to commit to it for a full adventure path book. And generally, if it's, you know, only a one shot's worth of art, you can limit the number of artists who have to get involved, which means that you have more control over like consistency of things, which I really appreciate, because I've worked on projects with a lot of artists where like all the artists have contributed wonderful work, but they'll make an executive decision about like the way that this druid's costume was supposed to look, and I won't have known that until it was too late, and then I'll have to design the same druid's costume for a different thing myself, and then I'll see the finished book and be like, man, these aren't consistent. This bothers me. But with one-shots, if you have a comparable amount of artists to the one writer that you have, then they are able to bring a lot more like holistically to the table and make it feel a lot more cohesive as a small, good, what's the word I want? Like boutique package.
Pack, as somebody who's published 3 one-shots now, what advice do you have to somebody who wants to write one?
Kind of like what I talked about earlier, is just picking something that you really like and want to do a deep dive on. If it's your first time writing a one-shot, I would recommend looking for a topic that kind of has sort of like steps broken out for you. So with my first one, it was a 5-room puzzle dungeon, and I had picked a theme that dealt with grief and PTSD. So I sort of had the stages laid out for me, so it was really easy to design around them and figure out exactly what mechanics I wanted to put in to make an engaging sort of module. So that would be my advice, is like for your first one, just pick something that already sort of has steps to it, and then it'll kind of come together naturally, and it makes the subsequent ones a lot easier to do.
Cool. So I've had a lot of friends say that they love running one-shots as a grinder, because they make characters who don't matter and just kill them. Or like doing, because it's a one-shot and it doesn't matter. I've also talked to people who like having a one-shot as an epilogue, or a one-shot as like a way to break up a campaign in the middle. Or, so I'll give you an example. One of my Uncaged adventures that we haven't gotten to yet, a family reunion, I actually wrote in a way that you have little scenes that can each be put into an ongoing campaign. So that's a one shot that can be like little sections stuck into an ongoing campaign as little shots in the arm.
Ooh,
kind
like
of thing.
that.
So I wanted to get everybody's idea on, how do you think one shots work best as part of a campaign? Like if you're not making a campaign entirely of one shots.
I have a lot of opinions on this, so I will either go first or last, depending on whether you two need time to buffer or whether you... Nobody's saying anything, I'm going. So I love one-shots in larger campaigns, and I'm going to talk, hopefully not too long, but I'm going to talk a bit at length about it, because I think that there's sort of 3 main ways that they can be used really, really well. And the first one, which Kristen Grace in chat just said, is that they are excellent prequels and getting the characters set up so that they know each other. Because personally, it drives me nuts when I have to spend the first like 4 or 5 sessions of an adventure path just sort of trying to figure out what my character's deal is with all the other characters in the party. But I've had adventure paths where the DM has run a one-shot to like establish us as a group, and then, you know, we flash forward like 2 years or something, and that's when the main adventure path starts. So we have that common ground that we can all draw back on and be like, ah, yes, we have a history as a group. We can move forward from this. So it gives you the chance to, you know, try out a character, and if you don't like them, then be like, well, my prequel character is not going to be the one that I play in the actual adventure path. But also, you get a chance to get to know the other PCs in your party and establish your dynamics and figure out like how you want to exist in the world together, which I really, really like. And kind of the flip side of that is I am doing a level 1 through 20 campaign right now. And when it's done, the DM is capping it off by doing a epilogue where we basically just get to actually enjoy our level 20 capstones that you never get to because nobody plays to level 20. So we have an upcoming epilogue that's going to be something to the effect of like the Scouring of the Shire. So like the main adventure is done, but that doesn't mean that all of the work is done. So we as a party just get to have a great sandbox where we get to go wild with our level 20 abilities and just wreak havoc. Hopefully we're going back to some place that we went to when we were really low level, and then we can just like flatten it and it's going to be great. So I just think that like I'm going to find that very satisfying as a player because it will help, you know, you help see how far you've come as a party. And that's really nice, especially because most pre-written adventure paths tend to level you up like right before the final boss fight. And so you get one encounter where you have like your last cool thing and then the whole game is done. And that's sad and I don't like it. I'm the market for more tier 4 one-shots. It's me. I want more people to do them.
I love that because I know some people write tier 4 one-shots expressly to give people the experience of a tier 4 one-shot because so many campaigns end at level 10 or at level 12. So they're like, here's a one-shot so you could just make a level 20 character and see what it's like. Go have fun.
Yeah. I had no follow-up other than, yeah, I agree strongly. It's great. More people should do it.
So Packer Inc., what do you think? How do you think one-shots work best in a campaign to supplement it or stand on their own?
You want to go, Pack? Because I have ideas, but I don't want to like cut you off.
Yeah, I have 2. So like Gwen said, I really like the idea of having that capstone at the end of a campaign for higher level adventures because you don't get to play them often. And why give somebody a shiny toy and then take it away from them, basically. But I also think that if the party needs a break, like if you're running a particularly like emotionally heavy sort of campaign, like doing a one-shot that's like lighthearted and fun, or like sort of like your beach episode is a really great way to like break up a really emotionally heavy sort of topic that you're going through as a whole party, and gives everybody like sort of like a rejuvenation period or essentially your long rest to be able to go ahead and finish like the second half of the like campaign that you're doing. So that's how I think that they're best utilized.
I see one-shots as a very thematic thing, so you kind of have to read when you want to do them and when it's going to work best for you. So I used to run individual one-shots like when it was the holidays and people were getting tired of the same doom and gloom and wanted to do something different. Or I could see someone like sticking a one-shot in their game where, let's be honest, sometimes you have no idea what you're doing next with your campaign. You just want to send them to a town and have them do something where you don't have to come up with anything. That's a really great way to like buffer yourself and give yourself time to kind of have your characters still be involved in something that's going on without you having to be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Take these crumbs. Have fun with them. Don't eat them all in one place. But it's also just, I think that a lot of one-shots that we've kind of come across have been a really great way to continue to kind of like feed the engine as it would be. Because I know a lot of people can get very tired of doing the same thing over and over or start feeling like their character might get really weary and tired of helping people, or really tired of like the life that they've chosen, for lack of a better term. And having a one shot where it can be very focused on characters, or can still be like helping someone but with a different angle, can be a good way to kind of reignite that fire without having to be like, please, I wrote this thing, get involved, I'm begging you, I spent 8 hours prepping this.
Please care about my last 2 months of work.
Please care about this NPC that I randomly named Jim John, please. But
sorry.
No, that's all I wanted to say.
Kind of building off of that, I think that a really good use of one-shots that a lot of people who aren't DMs probably don't realize is a good use of one-shots is intentionally sprinkling them into your larger adventure path when you know people are going to be missing for a while, to adjust the pacing of your adventure. Because I've definitely had adventure paths and campaigns where, as a player, I didn't realize this was happening until the DM told me, like a year later, that entire arc for, 3 weeks when our friend Chris was traveling was a one-shot. And it just, like, the DM was able to blend it in so seamlessly that it didn't feel like it at the time, but it was a different adventure path that was just meant to slow things down so that the person who couldn't make it to the game was able to still enjoy kind of all the major important plot beats from the actual book. And that's something that you can absolutely do by just kind of throwing out the entire beginning and end of a one-shot and just find like the middle meat of it that's like the good stuff that the players are going to be doing, and then write your own reason for why they're doing it, and then you're able to blend that in really seamlessly. And that's a very useful aspect of one-shots that I think a lot of people don't consider.
Yeah, I really like how I don't want to say all one-shots, but I will say most of them explore an idea. And this is what Pac mentioned, like doing a deep dive on something, whether it's a theme, whether it's Book of Seasons is right behind me, whether it's a season or a part of a season, or like queerness or dysphoria, just some of the things that we had in Uncaged, and really exploring that. And I think using them as a way in the middle, maybe if somebody's missing, maybe if it's just to give your players something completely different. So let's say you have a really combat heavy party, and maybe one of the players isn't suited for combat and might be like, damn, I wish I had rolled up like a more combat-y character. I'll just stand in the back. Give them like a mystery one shot or something where they can shine. I would, in that situation, actually recommend like just balancing out your campaign a lot so that they're not fighting constantly and feeling like they can't do anything. But also, if your characters are killing everything that they see because bad, do a one shot where there's a benevolent hag.
Do an Uncaged one-shot.
Yeah, have them deal with ramifications of that. Like they see a hag and think bad, but the town loves this hag and she's helpful. And how do they do that? Like make them think about the consequences of their actions, or give them something to think about and explore in that way.
Mm-hmm. Going off of that, I definitely think you can stick one-shots in your campaign, especially if you really want to do something like DM just said that is very different from what you typically tend to do. You can definitely stick in one-shots that either contrast the main theme of your campaign or that enforce it. So it really depends on how your players are reacting to what you're kind of doing, but you could stick in something like Jess said, where if you are a very combat-driven party, you could stick them into a situation where it requires them to be pacifists, or there are some serious consequences for them. Or if it's a campaign about like moral gray area, you could stick something into them where you can see how like apathy and being complacent in that moral gray area can be very bad for people. So it really depends on what you're trying to hammer home, and sometimes giving people the contrast to that can do more of enforcing than giving them something that complements it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really up to how you want to do that.
So I think all of us here have played one shots at home on a stream on games that aren't streamed but are still online and at a con. So what's it like playing one shots in those different settings and situations?
One of the first big game cons I ever went to was one in my home city, and I signed up to DM because they didn't have enough. So I ran a setting that I have never played before, and it was like a pre-made D&D Adventures League adventure, so I had to make all my people in my friend group make legal Adventures League characters. And then I had to read through the book within the half an hour bus ride getting there. And I had to figure out what I'm doing. And I had one of the few groups that managed to not kill a thing that needed to be killed, but also not die. So that was very weird, but I will say that if you decide to run something in a situation like a con where you've never done it before, it's really not that big of a deal. And you don't need to worry about being like every other GM in the room or running it like everyone else. Because people signed up to play with you, even if you were the only person available. If they wanted to, like, not have that kind of experience, they didn't have to sign up and they didn't have to decide to play with you. So I don't know if that's encouraging. I don't know if that's freeing. It's up to you to make a story into your own, even if it has already been written by a person, by someone else. That's not you.
So I interpreted the question a little bit differently. So I'm going to answer my interpretation of it, which is to compare kind of the way that one-shots feel in different situations. I think that the at-home ones are definitely, the most loosey-goosey, but the ones that are either played on a stream or at a con tend to feel really pressed for time all the time. And that's something that is really tricky with one-shots, is that you do want to get the entire thing done within a certain window of time. So you don't have that much flexibility with like messing around for 2 hours because the DM made up an NPC who turned out to be really cool and was just supposed to tell us about the adventure hook, but instead we were like, we need her whole life story. Not speaking from personal experience, but it is just something to balance. And I think that in terms of playing or writing or running one-shots, I would definitely personally recommend the at-home variety first before trying to do them at a con or at a stream, just because you're more able to freely explore and take your time and get weird with it. And it's hard to let yourself feel that freedom when you have a ticking clock at a con because somebody else needs that table in 2.5 more hours.
Hack, any thoughts?
I don't really have any additional thoughts to add. I've never run a game at a con before, so I can't really speak to that, but most of the games that I run tend to be online. What I notice, or what I feel like, is that when you're running a one-shot, like the quality of, I guess, like the preparation that you have to do varies wildly with them. So I guess what I would like to say with regards to streaming, like if you're, or just running one online, is just making sure that you, like, while you don't have to prep as much as you would for like a longer campaign, you still need to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time to like test and make sure that all of your things are set up properly. Like with reference to running my module on stream, like the one I wrote for Uncaged, you have to set up your own maps really in like Roll20 or whatever you use as your sort of like your gaming stuff. So whereas if I was running it in my home, like I can just pull out my map and draw the rooms very quickly and like have it ready to go, I guess. So I guess it's just like the level of intensity you need to still prepare a one shot.
I would also say that the con one-shots definitely tend to be pretty combat focused for the most part. And a lot of that is because that's the pillar of play that like official publishers tend to write for. And a lot of that is because it's kind of the easiest to not get sidetracked on. So it's the easiest to like fit within a concrete time window. If you know how long an encounter is going to take and your adventure is 85% encounters, then you know how long 85% of your adventure will take. So you're more able to confidently say, hey, Adventurers League, this will fit within the window that you have given me.
Yeah. Quick thing, if you haven't turned in your ticket yet, please do that. You can do that on the page where you registered. I was gonna ask another thing, and it was gonna be, oh yeah, because combat one-shots are so prevalent and we tend to think of them as such like an explosive battle thing, particularly at cons, is it possible, and I know that it is, but is it possible to have like an emotionally investing one-shot? And how do you go about doing that?
Oh yeah, of course it's possible.
I feel like...
Everyone...
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I feel like my pessimistic answer is play with people you already know. But that's not a good, helpful answer, so if people have one of those to offer, I'm all ears.
Gosh. It definitely is that thing where everyone immediately goes to, oh, we're playing D&D. I want to hit stuff with my magic big sword that isn't compensating. It's okay. But you absolutely can do emotional one-shots. Like, that whole idea of making it prologues, epilogues, little breaks of time, you can 100% make those emotional. It can be someone, like, leaving the party for a short period of time, and the party dealing with how to deal with their absence. Whether it's because of a lack of combat, like how we had when Euphoria, who's our main super charismatic person, was gone, we had to figure out how to do the brunt of that emotional lifting. And that also was a very emotional experience because you got people saying stuff that they normally wouldn't say around other people. And you have people like confessing that they're very vulnerable and that they're afraid they're going to mess this up. And that in and of itself, that party interaction can be a very emotional experience. Doesn't necessarily have to be sad, but it can be very good for making your relationships both in character and out of character a lot stronger without having to physically ram down the door of something to get your point across.
I did think of a better answer to give, which is that one, this is sort of assuming that the entire table knows going into it that you're going to be playing an adventure that isn't as combat forward, because I think that's really where the issue comes in, is not that somebody has written and is DMing an adventure that's focusing on other pillars of play, but it's that the party wasn't expecting it and they get cranky. So assuming that everyone knows going into it, like this is going to be a really talky episode or whatever, you can have a lot of fun with that, still building a character that's made for combat, and then just like having that fish out of water experience, because that's like where the good stuff comes in anyway. Like for Threeflings, the show that we're all on this Twitch channel. So I play Idara, who is a fighter, she has literally no magic. We have homebrewed the magic out of the tiefling. Nothing about her is magic. She is just a fighter. And Jess messaged me before we started this entire show to be like, we're doing Uncaged Anthology one-shots. Most of these can be solved without combat. Are you sure you want to be a fighter? And I was just like, yes. I want her to be the most uncomfortable all the time. That sounds great. So like, there's tons of episodes where we never roll an attack. Tons. I say tons. There's at least several episodes where none of us roll an attack ever. And it's all just like talking to people, trying to solve the maze, trying to solve the mystery, trying to get people who don't like each other to at least like be willing to meet face to face. And what makes that fun for me to play is that my character is really bad at all of those things. But I knew going into it that that was going to be the case. If I didn't know going into it, if Jess hadn't said, hey, you're going to have a terrible time, then I would have had a terrible time.
I mean, yeah, embrace the weakness and the failure that can come along with that. And like I put in chat, always make sure that if you plan on having like an emotional boundary or something like that, where someone may roll a character that is completely not built for the situation at hand, make sure you get consent from your players and that you have that kind of safety guideline in place, because no one wants to be unpleasantly surprised and then have to step away or withdraw from the whole situation where you can't really kind of take care of that and make sure that those people get the attention that they need while you're trying to deal with this. But yeah, definitely be willing to go with what is uncomfortable or irregular when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was just gonna emphasize like the importance of having like safety tools in place and just being transparent with your players, because I think like it's one thing to go in with the mindset of yep, we have we have a clear line of like baddies we need to fight, so it'll be like ABC action. But I think also too is that a lot of people get so hung up on like this is D&D, like we have to have fighting, and nobody's saying that you can't. You can make your like your one shot have the different pillars of play, and like so that would be the thing where like I'm just gonna like go back to like my module specifically, like if the players are like assuming again that you're using safety tools and all that and everybody's on the same page, um, set up consequences for your players if they do certain actions like during the one shot, because I think consequences for their actions is a really good way to add in the combat element without making the entire one shot about combat. It'll be based on the more emotional aspects of the one shot, but it'll still provide the players who like decide that they wanted to play a paladin or a fighter or a ranger, it still gives them their time to shine, while also sort of like catering to some of the other classes that rely on persuasion or like talking to people or lying to people, to like get in through the door. So I think that's really important too, is that we don't necessarily have to cut out combat out of a one shot. You just put it somewhere else.
Yeah. Also,
feel like the Patrick Star, you take the combat and you just push it over here. But you don't get rid of it, it's just over here.
Also, kind of building off of that, if you're making a one shot where you know that combat isn't going to be a priority, you can make sure that there's still a variety of stuff for your players to do, so it's not just perception rolls and persuasion rolls over and over and over again. Like if
Please do that.
Yeah, but also if you're interested in writing a one shot and you want an interesting way to go about like social encounters, I would strongly recommend looking at Paizo's Adventure Path War for the Crown, at least the first book. It's just a party. The whole thing so far, at least, I'm in the middle of playing it, is just a party, but it's got a ton of like related skill checks that different classes who aren't just a bard can do successfully, because like, you know, it's you're trying to make this person like you and they like talking about plants, so you better roll a nature check, sort of thing. So like there's variety to be had in those other pillars. This is a little derailed from the main point, but like there are ways to make a one shot without combat interesting. You just need to put in the work to make sure that you're doing that part of your adventure service.
Yeah, and
Justice.
I think that comes out of exploring the, like when you're writing a one shot, I've written a few at this point, when you're writing one, you want to keep that theme in mind and dig into like what exactly are they going to do in any situation. If they're interacting, like there's something that I really like about the way Pugmire adventures are written, in that at the beginning of each scene it asks a question and answers it and says like, what do the players need to accomplish in this scene and what is standing in their way, and whether that's something that the DM, or in Pugmire it's called a guide, the guide can just look at that and go, like they'll have read the scene beforehand, but what needs to happen here and what is preventing them, and then the rest, I mean, if you want to, you can just throw it out the window and make it up. But like that is the important thing that you need to have. So not along those lines, also please turn in your tickets and put your questions in the chat. Thoughts on breaking up the monotony that can happen with a lot of one shots, because so many of them are hook. Part 1, meeting the conflict. Part 2, explore the conflict. Part 3, boss battle. And then conclusion.
I think this ties in well with a question we got earlier regarding your campaign of one-shots. How much continuity do you have between episodes? And is it hard for players to stay invested if there isn't a clear lasting impact of what they do in any given session? Because it's definitely the case that a lot of one-shots are written with like clear beginning, middle, end, and you hit that end by the time your 3 to 4 hours are up. This isn't me answering. This is me making the question harder.
I will say it can depend on the system. I think for us with Uncaged, and I can't answer as a player, but one shot can mean so many things. Like having written one shots for a variety of systems and things now, I have written one shots where I had a 900 word limit, and I have written one shots where I had a 10,000 word limit. So one shot is basically anything from 2 to 6 hours of play. And if you are in that 2 hours of play, you just need two things, like forget the intro, get there, and then have a thing. If it's on the longer side, you can put in a bunch of different little things. We ran a Cat, and with Uncaged, we ran Cat Evans's adventure from that. She had 9 or 10 different sections in our 2,500 word limit.
There was so much.
It was a lot, and there wasn't that like 3-act structure. It was very cool. A couple people that we've done had 5 sections. Mm-hmm. So that's a way to break it up. Just have smaller sections.
And kind of related to that, so the chat question we got about how like our campaign of one-shots works, I think we intentionally keep it a little episodic because the premise of Threeflings is that we are playing through the Uncaged one-shots. And we know that, and our audience knows that. So every episode is meant to be fairly self-contained, and that's part of the appeal and the premise. But if we were trying to turn this into a far more cohesive campaign, I think a lot of it would revolve around our wonderful DM, who already does so much work, basically doing what I mentioned earlier and taking the middle of each one-shot, where the actual meat of whatever the task is, and keeping that, and then changing the beginning and end and probably some player name or NPC names, and trying to weave them all together that way. Because one-shots are really, really good for a lot of things, but because they want to be self-contained, if you don't spend that time editing the setup and the consequences, then you tend to end up with a cast of characters that's just like impossible to remember. And also you never see any of these people ever again. And a lot of that is what makes it start feeling episodic. Like then it becomes the Pokemon anime where you go to a new town, you fight the new gym leader, and then you leave and never talk about it ever again. And also it's 10 years later and everyone's still 11 years old for some reason. But that's probably the main thing I would recommend if you are a DM looking to stitch together one-shots, is just get really, really good at, what's the phrase when you're a writer, like kill your babies, kill your darlings? Get really good at killing other people's darlings. They don't know you. They can't stop you. Take the good parts you like, leave everything else, and make it your own. And it will benefit greatly from that time that you spend just cutting out all the fat that isn't coherent when put together.
Does anybody else want to talk about that? Or we can get to some of these other questions because it's about that time. So I'll ask y'all, is it hard for you to stay invested if there isn't a clear impact of what you did in a given session? Because that was one of the first questions that we got regarding continuity.
I personally would say no, because at least for the character that I'm playing, she is very much invested in everyone's life and thinks everyone's life is important. So from a character perspective, I would say no. And from a player perspective, I would also say no. Because it is important to remember that no matter how short or how small the impact is, it is still an impact. So, for example, like Sisyphus, he will continue to push that rock up that hill, even if he knows it's going to go right back down. Even if you know that what you are doing can easily be undone that doesn't mean that the process of getting to that conclusion or to that impact is any less valuable, which can be a thing that a lot of people kind of look past, especially in games like this where you're so obsessed with glory and like reputation and history and legend. But definitely, I would say, no matter how small of an impact it is, any impact from players or people is an impact worth considering.
What do you think of Pack?
Like, to kind of build off of that, I don't think that it's hard to stay invested, just because we've had a couple of situations where what we've done in one shot has carried over to the other one, either to our benefit or to our detriment. For instance, I believe it was Death's Bargain, where we made
Death's Agents.
Yeah. Death's Agents, that's it. Where we made a very impulsive decision based on the evidence we had from previous one-shots we had played. And that ended up with us getting cursed and basically becoming like, it is impossible for our characters to die for a whole year until we fill out our duty to the god of death. So I think that having sort of, like, I think also too with the Uncaged Anthology, especially if you decide that you want to string these particular modules together to make a campaign, all of them are going to have, like I said, either like a beneficial or a detrimental impact on the characters. And it's something that you can kind of carry throughout the whole campaign. So I don't think that the interest will ever really be truly lost from players. And I think it's also really important that if you do decide to string a bunch of one-shots together as a campaign, that you do your work ahead of time. As we mentioned before, that setting this up takes a lot of work. But if you are able to sort of like break it up, so you're not doing the same things, it'll have like a greater impact on the table as a whole as you sit around and tell each other a collaborative story, like going through them. So,
and kind of related to that, I think that it's possibly I don't know if it's giving your players enough credit to say that they would lose interest in a series of one-shots because there aren't far-reaching consequences for their actions, because the far-reaching consequences become things that the player characters experience and grow from over time. So that's one part of my answer. But the second part is that as a DM, I think it's good to look for opportunities for even ways to just kind of remind players of adventures they've already done. Like maybe they hear from an NPC in a previous adventure, or they get contacted to solve this missing persons problem because they solved a previous missing persons problem a couple weeks ago. And just little ways to tie things together like that can go a long way. There's also kind of a separate conversation going on in chat that I want to say on the record so that YouTube also knows about it, that we as players very much latch on to like specific NPCs and events that happen, and then we'll keep bringing them up forever and ever and ever. So there's like one specific hag that we just love to pieces, so she gets brought up like once every 2 episodes. This is the equivalent of Threeflings lore, is occasionally we'll mention a hag by name and then have to explain that this is a hag from a previous adventure. And so your players will find ways to make it more contiguous if you let them. And if you just encourage that and let that pan out successfully, then I think you will find that it's not that hard to do. But also, it helps if your players know going into it that it is going to be like a series of one-shots and you're not trying to trick them, because then it becomes more about how the group as a whole is growing as people and like maybe their net impact on the world in a broader sense, and not one specific monumental heroic task that they have to solve.
Yeah, so we had another question that was, what do you do if, this was from Kuriyuki2, if the players love the one-shot so much, the theme is different, they prefer it over the campaign they're currently in? from a DM's perspective, I would take that as advice to maybe alter the campaign to go into that direction if it's something that the players really enjoyed. It doesn't mean you have to throw out your entire campaign, but it's something that you're doing together. Like role playing isn't just the DM makes the rolls and the players have to, be there in it. I would say, they're giving you something, take that and make a couple shifts, come up, maybe do another session 0, like a session 0.5 and say, okay, we really liked that. Where do we want to go from here? Any other thoughts on that?
I think that sums it up pretty well. Succinct. Like part of the appeal of tabletop RPGs is that you are not beholden to anyone's rules except for those made by the group at the table. So you can do whatever you want merely because you want to.
Yeah. We did have a question that was, do we run all our one-shots in the same system or switch system and genres? So us here, the group of players for Threeflings, we all play D&D because we're playing the Uncaged Anthology. If you missed that, it's feminist take on monsters. I also play in a group on Saturdays called Sigil Spotlight, where we do one-shots from all sorts of different systems, all run by creators. And there are a couple different, a couple of people are, John Connor Self is a Adventure League writer who is playing the same character in multiple different systems, which is pretty cool to see if that's something you want to see. Also, I will say we might go a little bit over time just because we want to get to all these questions. So if you need to run, we are going to put this on our YouTube and it'll be on all of our Twitters and it'll be on my channel. But please turn in your tickets before you go. We're going to stay and answer these questions.
I'm posting the YouTube channel link in the chat right now so that you can go and follow or whatever, subscribe, and then you'll know once this is up. It's going to go up pretty much as soon as YouTube processes it. So you can watch it later tonight if you have to run, because it's Gen Con and people have places to be.
But also, if you want to come back at 8 p.m. Eastern tonight, you can watch us play Threeflings. So
you can also catch up on the VODs that are on our YouTube if you want to know more about what we're doing here.
Yeah. Just watch Death's Agents. It's the only one with a semblance of lore. That's the only one you need to know about. Anyway.
So another one, creating fulfilling character arcs in a short amount of time. I'm going to shoot that one over to you, the three of you.
So I think that it would be tricky to have a character arc over the course of 4 hours. I think that is a tall task to ask of yourself as a player or ask of your party as a DM. But I think that it is very realistic to think that your characters will have an arc over the course of a campaign based around one-shots because, especially for the Threeflings, because the premise of the Uncaged one-shots is taking monsters and then reimagining them and rethinking them, by necessity, these characters have sort of learned to interact with the world in a specific way. So part of the fun of this adventure path was making a character that did not resonate with this right away, and then having her kind of learn and grow and understand more that maybe sometimes monsters are just chilling and you can leave them alone. But yeah, if the question is meant to be having a character arc over the course of 3 hours, then personally, I would think that is dreaming a little too big.
I'd like to say that it is possible in 3 to 4 hours or 3 to 6 hours to definitely have growth. And I mean, it still contributes to a general character arc and how your character sort of interprets the world. So it doesn't have to be great big, sort of pivot points in their lives. It can be something as it can be something like a decision, like a really tough decision that they had to make during the one shot that sort of sets them on the path, and for you to start considering how this is going. I made this decision because I felt that this was the best way to go. How is this going to impact on the long term? So I think not focusing so much on the meat and potatoes or the bone of like the character arc, but definitely it's a great point to sort of like, it's sort of like the little tick marks in between like the big tick marks on like a clock. Like that's what like the one shots are, and like the decisions that you have to make in between them. So I guess it would be you're able to focus more on the smaller moments rather, and the smaller decisions rather than like the big life-changing ones, because even the small decisions that your character makes still has an impact on how they're going to approach the rest of the session.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say you could definitely, like, I would say at least work on developing your character as you play a one shot, especially if it is in the middle of a long standing campaign, because inherently when I play my characters, I really like to tune into things that drive them forward. So when you have a one shot, for example, that might deal with like dealing with grief and interacting with people, you can play into the fact that your character might have a hard time dealing with that. Why do they have a hard time dealing with it? Like you can go back into their backstory, or how they kind of want to use their own experiences to interact with other people. And that in itself is more character development and more character exposition without needing to like slam down something on the table being like, my parents are dead. That's why I'm an adventurer.
Oh no.
But yeah, you can definitely explore character arcs and motivations in smaller ways. Like, for example, if you get hired in a one shot to go and return something to someone, you might have a personal vendetta as a character against doing that because you promised yourself you'd never let yourself like be used as a messenger. And that can be a way to explore larger themes within a smaller, kind of more digestible form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had another question that was this was from Sevs. What do you do when your one shots take years to play out? I think this goes back into they're not really being. I'm blaming this on people who publish one shots that are too long, because I as a writer am more on the one shots should be somewhere from 900 to 3,000 words, not 5 to 10,000 words. Although I have written them, but I will say it's not on you. Some things that are billed as one shots are mini arcs, and they should just be called mini campaigns. Something that is 10,000 words, it's okay. It can take 3 sessions. That's technically 1,000 words is an hour of play. That can be, 10 hours. It's okay. Don't blame yourself.
I feel like a good frame of reference is like these Uncaged adventures that routinely take us 3+ hours to play through on stream, where we are ostensibly caring about finishing within a certain time frame, give or take, depending on our moods. What the word limit on those was 2,500 words?
Yeah, 3,000.
Yeah, so
it was 3,000.
3,000.
Okay, yes. 3,000.
Yeah. So it's nothing. It is so small. However long you think your one shot is going to take, double that, and that's like maybe long enough. But
I want to chime in that like this is like, I know that it's a jokey question, but like I have personally had the experience of running my own one shot that I wrote for Uncaged, and I think that this entirely depends on your table, like hands down, because I ran my 5-part puzzle dungeon with 2 people and it took them 2 hours to complete. And then I ran it for a group of 7 and it took them 40 hours to complete the dungeon. I'm not even kidding. Sorry, Paul and Andrea. Sorry. So I think it really depends on who you have sit at your table and how they approach problem solving. Because I feel like, yes, 40 hours. I'm not even kidding. We spent an entire like work week doing it. It was interesting because they were like, when is this going to end? And I was like, whenever you guys get it. Like I've thrown you all the bones I can. I'm trying to help you at this point. I'm like dropping you hints and stuff. Like, so I like I said, I think it really depends on who's sitting, like the type of personalities that you have sitting at the table.
Were they like trapped in your house for that whole time?
No, this was an online game. This is an online game that we were playing like every week for like 4 hours at a time. It was wild.
I thought you were like, you cannot leave my dinner table until
No,
this is touched.
Yeah,
seatbelts stay on.
No, it was an online game, but it was, like I said, I think part of it was like there were so many different personalities at the table, and everybody had an idea as to how they wanted to solve it. So I think that, like I said, it just depends on the environment of the table, the types of players you have, and if it's like, if you're playing with people you know, because this was a case of me playing with only one person that I knew really well at the time. I have since gotten to know the other people a little bit more. I had no idea what their play styles were before I walked into it. So I think knowing your players will definitely help you gauge how long it's going to take to do something. When you're playing with strangers, it's a little bit more up in the air, but I mean, it can still be just as fun, and we still talk about it. Like we got done playing months ago, and we still talk about the fact that it took them
40 hours to complete a one-shot.
Oh, work week.
Oh my god.
Yeah, with my Princess Anthology adventure, when I was playtesting it, my playtesters died in the second part because not all of them died, but they tried to fight something that was way tougher than them and didn't have a conversation first. They were like, we're adventurers, we kill bad guys, this is what we do. And they kind of missed the end of the adventure, so it was very short. And then when we played at CouchCon with the Biscuits Brigade, the same adventure, we still did it in, I think, 2.5. No, that was on my channel. Just kidding. We did Princesses Save Dragons with that adventure. But yeah, I think it was like 2.5, 3 hours instead of like an hour and a half, 2 hours, because they talked to the dragon instead of telling the dragon to die.
Diplomacy.
This is my sword name, Diplomacy.
So I think we talked about this with Anti-Fishlings a little bit, but have you ever brought an NPC from a one-shot into your ongoing game, or have you ported an NPC from a campaign into a one-shot for fun?
I think there are a couple of NPCs that we still talk about fairly regularly, and it depends on... I've noticed that it depends on if we need a guest Threefling for like that week's episode. Like, for instance, when we bring in Shai, we end up talking about Acha a lot and wondering how she's doing. And then...
For context, Acha is a child that we pawned off on a guest PC, and then the guest PC occasionally comes back. And so we're like, how's that child we gave you?
To be fair, we gave her
there is an NPC in the adventure who offers to raise her, but they did not trust the NPC.
Which was valid.
Okay, but honestly,
he was going to raise her as like a religious figurehead. She was 8. She didn't need that kind of pressure.
I mean, yeah, honestly, let's be real.
Anyway. Sorry, I cut you off, Jesspack.
I kind of lost my train of thought myself.
Oh, no.
I'll get it back. Yeah, so I think that we have certainly have our own personal favorites that we like, as Gwen mentioned earlier, like that we like. If we like them enough, we sort of talk about them in passing and then just have to explain each time that this is from a previous episode.
Yeah.
If you want to get the joke, watch the previous episode.
Which, normal tables don't have to do, but because we routinely tell people that they can jump in whenever, then we feel obligated to explain ourselves when we make a reference to something that already happened.
Cite your sources.
Yeah.
Also, I think there's been a few NPCs that were Threeflings a regular sort of campaign. Like if we just had the one-shots peppered in, somebody like Anti-Fishlings would definitely make an appearance as opposed to just being mentioned all of the time. The closest we've had to that is sometimes when the hook is like, you're hired by a noble. I'm like, well, you're hired by a noble who knows the noble that you did this task for earlier.
Yeah. And tangentially related to this question, I think that it's a very good idea to do this if you are trying to weave one-shots into a larger campaign and just sort of mix up, like, you know, the quest giver for this one-shot is somebody you already know. And maybe you swap around the one-shot so that, like, the person you meet over the course of the one-shot turns out to be somebody who's important to the rest of the campaign, so that you get that sense of continuity more, because you make your own rules at the table. That's why it's fun.
One of my favorite things, that this doesn't apply to our campaign, at least not yet, but with one shots, when it gives the options of, like, something bad is happening to this town, but the PCs can be from the town.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they care. So they're not like murder tourists just coming in like, I'm going to solve your problems. And if they're from the town, they might have like a better shot at passing certain lore checks or communicating with different people just because they're from there and they know.
Ooh, yeah. And that's good because that ties in with the earlier question we got about like integrating one-shots into like character arcs. And, you know, some one-shots are already designed to do that, apparently.
I just want to jump in before we close out this question and say that Ophelia was originally an NPC from my home campaign.
Nice.
Yeah, she was a healer with her partner, and they both kind of did medicine for the town that my player characters came to visit. And then when we were gonna do tieflings, I was just like, okay, I have a tiefling that I haven't touched in a while. Let's remix that. And now she is a player character, is much cooler, and is also much more fun for me to play.
All right, it looks like we've got 2 questions left.
Yeah. How do you keep so from Polar Bear on, which is a great name, how do you keep the one-shots from feeling like the game is on the rails versus having an open freedom of choice? Or how do you balance the feeling of choice in the session?
Ooh.
This is something I've really tried to focus on when I'm writing one-shots, actually, is giving a lot of options.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also something I think that's different when you're streaming a one-shot versus when you are playing one at home. Because if you are playing one at home or integrating it into your campaign, if the PCs are like, I don't want to do your hook, I want to fuck off and go over here, that's fine. You can give them stuff to do over there. If you're on a stream and you said, like, we're running this adventure today, you kind of have to be like, okay, but over there is the adventure that you're supposed to play. Everywhere is the adventure you're supposed to play. You just kind of have to work around it and basically make the adventure find them. So how does that work for the 3 of you?
I think to some extent you do need a bit of buy-in from your party. And this is true for every game, regardless of whether it's a one-shot or not. You know, if your PCs don't want to go on the adventure, then nobody's going to have a good time. So to some extent, in terms of getting them into the adventure, there's certainly that, where like you do just sort of have to, sometimes you as a player have to find a reason that your, you know, cantankerous PC would still be willing to help this town, because otherwise there's no game and why are you even here at my house? Versus like, once you're actually in the adventure, there is a lot of flexibility in the Uncaged adventures for the most part for how you solve the problem, like Jess was saying, and that, at least in my experience, tends to come more into the writing side of things. I think as a DM, it's unfair to ask you to come up with alternate solutions and ways to solve the adventure that don't exist outside of the like 3,000 words or so, just because your party might go a different direction. So like good one-shots give you that room so that they don't feel like they're on rails because they're not written to be on rails. Mm-hmm. And that kind of solves the problem for itself.
Yeah, part of that comes from definitely communicating with the people that you're playing with if you're learning the game, or vice versa, and telling them, hey, at one point this might get a little bit like railroady, but it is because like so on and so forth. But also, like Gwen said, like having that variety of NPCs to talk to get information from or get the hooks from, or if one of your players is like running off somewhere, be like, hey, you find a thing in the ground or stuff of that nature, like making them organically run into reasons to care. Stuff of that nature can be very good, where if they're being very resilient against the idea of this is what you have to do, this is who you have to talk to. If you can't convince them to care, make them run into reasons to care.
Pack, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, they kind of summed it up nicely. So I don't really have anything of note to add. Just, yeah, highlighting the transparency that you need to have with your players is just important, I think, when you're doing one-shots. So.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just need a child to kick you in the knees and say, hey, my family disappeared, please help.
Yeah. And again, I do think it's unfair to one-shots as a genre to assume that they will be railroady. Not at all trying to say that that is what Polar Baron was like assuming, but as a broader comment, a lot of people do tend to say that one-shots can get railroady, and maybe they should be playing better one-shots. Because in my experience, no, not really.
Yeah, I really like some of the ones where it's like you need X amount of information, but you can gather it from these 10 or 8 different places.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have like 5 pieces of information, you can move on to the next thing, kind of thing. But here's a dozen different ways that you can get it. And that can let the players play to their strengths or their choice. And it's not just, things are happening because reasons.
Just one more thing to add, because it just struck me right as you were talking, Jess. But I also want to highlight that something that I really enjoy that we do with Threeflings, and I really I've done it for the one-shots that I've run. I really cannot encourage more you sitting down with your players after you've gone through the one-shot to tell them how it was supposed to go, because a lot of the time, sometimes they'll give you more material during the one shot that you can use later, like if you're peppering this in with your campaign, that you can bring it up again. And I think it's really also a neat experience to sort of have that conversation with your players and hearing their reactions and go, oh, so that was the way I was supposed to solve that. That's good to know.
Yeah.
I think that it sort of strengthens the experience that they have with the one shot, and it may also sort of give them more enthusiasm to go into the next one, because having that debrief afterwards can be really sort of cathartic in its own way, just hearing what the writer had laid out on a page versus what they actually experienced.
Also, if you need PCs to go a specific direction, just tell them that that area is off limits, and they will want nothing more than to go right there every time, no matter how clever they think they are.
Yeah, also Showers, my friend, and him saying purchase the full game to continue to this area.
Oh no.
Is very good.
Next question, because we're 20 minutes over.
Yep. Julius Caesar, what do you think is the ideal amount of pages for written one-shot? I'm going to say this really is system dependent. So we've talked a lot about D&D in here. I personally think that, 3,000 words is fine. I like 3,000 words for a one shot. For Book of Seasons, I gave everybody 3,500 for a little more wiggle room, but 3,000 is a good length. If you're doing something that's powered by the apocalypse, it's going to be shorter. If you're doing Warhammer, it's going to be longer because Warhammer is wordier. But if you're doing Mothership, it's probably going to be much shorter because Mothership is almost entirely bullet points. So that's really system dependent. Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah. But as far as 5e goes, to give you a pretty realistic benchmark, the Threeflings episodes have all been of adventures that are one-shots that are almost exactly 3,000 words. So you can just look at our YouTube catalog or channel history and see how long all those videos are, and that minus the 10-minute pre-roll is how long it took us to get through that adventure. So that should give you a pretty good idea with regard to adventure length in 5e.
Yeah, it's also super story dependent on what kind of story you're trying to tell and how short you're trying to tell the story, how concise you want to be, how much detail you want to add, and also how much you trust that people playing your adventures will be able to extrapolate data from what you've said, but also how you think players will interact with your adventure. Like, if you're going to write something for the Threeflings, you have to be aware of the fact that we're going to talk to someone for at least a good 3 hours in game, even though they might have one sentence and a throwaway name. So it really depends on
insight check their vibe.
Yeah,
Every
like it's a
time.
Insight check their tray.
It's literally just every time we visit someone, a vibe check. But it really depends on like how concise you want to be, how much detail you want to add, and also how much of a story you want to tell. Depends.
Yeah, I was just gonna chime in and say, like, with regards to specifically the one I wrote for the Uncaged Anthology, I had big plans. It was supposed to be a lot bigger than what it was, and then I had to pare it down a lot. So I think it just really depends on like the topic that you're setting out, or like the theme that you have for that particular one shot too, as to how much detail you want to put in, and or like Ink said, how much that the person reading your one shot is going to extrapolate data or make the connections that you weren't able to make, because a lot of the times when you're doing the one shots, especially if you're writing it for something like an anthology, you do have a word count that you have to abide by. And so what I would suggest is, if it's like your first time doing it and you're doing it outside of like an anthology setting or like a group setting, I would basically just give yourself a word count, like Jess said, like of 3,000 or 3,500, because that's a really good benchmark for a lot of them.
And
All
on
right.
that note,
Yeah. Well, if you haven't turned in your tickets, please do that. And thank you so much for coming. This was wonderful. I'm sorry we were in 30 minutes over, but this will be on our YouTube. And please come back tonight. We are playing All's Fair from Uncaged Volume 2 at 8 p.m. Eastern. And Sebs, with the last question, why are you all so awesome? Sebs, you are too sweet. Anyway, I'm Jess, and I'm running the game tonight, so I hope to see you there. And I believe our Twitters are all by our faces. So let's just go around real quick. Everybody introduce yourself. Starting with Gwen.
I'm Gwen DB all over the internet. I'm an illustrator, so you can find me on Twitter if you like pictures, but otherwise catch me tonight at 8 p.m. in the Threeflings live show here on this channel.
Pack.
I am Jess Pack. You can find me at Health Pack Stream on Twitter, and I'll be playing Euphoria, the Tiefling Bard, this evening. It'll be fun.
Ink.
Hi, I'm Ink. Find me on Twitter at TheseDeadPens, where I meme and scream. Tonight I'll be playing Ophelia, your tiefling. Oh god, I'm like, is she a warlock or a sorcerer?
She's a warlock.
She's a mess. She's a mess like me.
Your tiefling
Okay.
mess.
Yes.
And if you want more Uncaged, I'm moderating a panel tomorrow about Uncaged specifically. It's also going to be on this channel at 3 p.m. Eastern. So hope to see you tonight and hope to see you tomorrow afternoon. Have a great con, everybody.
Bye.
See y'all.